prayers. Buried with them in hopes they'd wake in another world. The Book of the Dead was a travel guide for the soul. Further east, China's Yellow River carried silk and stories. Buried with them in hopes they'd wake in another Emperors world. Ruled with the mandate of heaven. The Book of the Dead was a travel guide for the soul. Terracotta soldiers still guard an emperor's tomb. Frozen mid-stride. Thousands of years later. In still silence. Now listen to the sound of sandals on marble. You're in ancient Greece. Where philosophers wandered the agora. Plato. Socrates. Aristotle. Asking, what is justice? What is the soul? What is real? The Olympics began as a sacred ritual. Athletes competed nude to honor Zeus. And statues of victors lined the roads. Beyond the Aegean, Rome rises. A city of aqueducts and colosseums. Crowds roared as gladiators fought. Bread was thrown to keep the people happy. They built roads that stretched over 50,000 miles. Some still used today. At its peak, Rome ruled 60 million people. From Britain to North Africa. Its empire a patchwork of languages, gods, and lives. Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon. And time bent with him. Assassinated on the Ides of March. Still we whisper his name. Now drift south to the temples of the Maya. Hidden in jungle. Aligned with the stars. They tracked the cosmos. Predicted eclipses. Built cities with no metal tools. Each pyramid held secrets. And the ball game?
Throughout history, war has taken many forms. But perhaps no kind of battle tests the human spirit more than a siege. Trapped within walls, cut off from food, hope, and reinforcements. A siege is not just a battle of weapons, it is a battle of patience, fear, and survival. These are the greatest sieges in history. The Siege of Troy, the Greeks versus the Trojans. It began with the abduction of Helen, and it lasted 10 years. The Greeks laid siege to Troy in a campaign filled with duels, deception, and death. Legends say it ended with the famous Trojan horse, a gift left at the city gates, hiding Greek soldiers within. When night fell, Troy was betrayed from the inside and burned to the ground. The Siege of Babylon, the Persians versus the Babylonians. Cyrus the Great of Persia faced one of the most fortified cities in the world. Babylon's walls were tall, wide, and guarded by the Euphrates River. But Cyrus diverted the river and marched his army through the dry bed at night. The city fell without a fight. It was one of the most brilliant siege tactics in ancient history. The Siege of Syracuse, the Greeks and Carthage combined versus the Roman Republic. During the Second Punic War, the Roman Republic attacked the Greek city of Syracuse. But the defenders had a secret weapon, Archimedes. The great inventor created catapults, mirrors, and defensive machines to hold off the Romans for nearly 2 years. Eventually, the city fell, and Archimedes was killed by a Roman soldier, despite orders to keep him alive. The Siege of Masada, Zealots versus the Roman Empire. In the deserts of Judea, a group of Jewish rebels held out against the Roman Empire atop a desert plateau. The Romans built a massive ramp over months to breach the fortress. But when they arrived, they found silence. Nearly 1,000 defenders had taken their own lives rather than be captured. It remains one of the most haunting sieges in history. The Siege of Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire versus Persians. The capital of the Byzantine Empire was tested more than once. In 717, it held firm against Arab forces. But in 1453, it faced the full force of the Ottoman Empire. Sultan Mehmed II brought cannons, including the massive bombard that shattered the Theodosian walls. After 53 days, Constantinople fell. The city became Istanbul, and the medieval era came to an end. The Siege of Tenochtitlan, the Aztecs versus the Spanish conquistadors. In the heart of modern-day Mexico, Hernán Cortés led Spanish forces against the Aztec capital. With the help of native allies and aided by disease, the Spanish laid siege to the island city. The canals turned red. Famine and smallpox ravaged the defenders. After 93 days, the Aztec Empire collapsed. The Siege of Vienna, Austrians versus the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire reached the gates of Europe's core. Vienna was surrounded. But a massive relief force led by Polish King Jan Sobieski launched the largest cavalry charge in history. The siege was broken. It marked the high water mark of Ottoman expansion into Europe. The Siege of Leningrad, Nazi Germany versus the Russians. Nazi Germany surrounded the Soviet city of Leningrad for nearly 900 days. In the freezing cold, over 1 million civilians died from starvation, shelling, and disease. Yet the city never surrendered. It was one of the longest and most tragic sieges in modern warfare. The Siege of Stalingrad, Nazi Germany versus Russians. Stalingrad wasn't a siege by walls, but by sheer destruction. Germany's Sixth Army pushed deep into the Soviet Union. But Soviet forces refused to break. Urban warfare took over, room by room, floor by floor. Eventually, Germany's army was surrounded and forced to surrender. It was the turning point of World War II. The Siege of Dien Bien Phu, Vietnamese versus the French. In the jungles of Vietnam, French forces set up a base at Dien Bien Phu. They believed they were safe, but the Viet Minh surrounded them in the hills and brought in heavy artillery. After 57 days, the French surrendered. It marked the end of French colonial rule in Indochina and the rise of the Vietnam War. The Siege of Sarajevo, Bosnia Civil War. In the Bosnian War, the capital city of Sarajevo was trapped for almost 4 years. Snipers targeted civilians. Artillery rained down on homes, schools and hospitals. More than 10,000 people died, many of them children. It was the longest siege of a capital city in modern warfare. Sieges are not always won by force. Sometimes they are won by will, by the refusal to surrender, by hope that holds out even when the walls begin to crumble. From ancient stone cities to modern skylines, sieges have shaped the course of human history. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this. Subscribe to see future content. Sharing is caring.
Close your eyes. Let your breath slow. Let the weight of the day drift from your shoulders. You are about to float.
Once upon a time in old Europe, people started dying mysteriously and in large numbers, and the explanation, according to many, was not disease or bad sanitation. It was vampires. Yes, vampires. Dead people rising from the grave, sneaking into homes and draining the life from their neighbors. This wasn't just folklore whispered around campfires. Entire villages believed it. So did nobles, priests, and even doctors. The symptoms they saw: pale skin, weight loss, coughing up blood. Today we call that tuberculosis. Back then it was textbook vampire behavior. So what did they do about it? They grabbed shovels, marched to the graveyards and started digging people up. Once they opened a coffin, the body was judged on appearance. If it wasn't decomposing fast enough, that meant it was undead. Sometimes the stomach was bloated or there was blood at the mouth. Instead of realizing that these were normal signs of decomposition, they assumed the corpse had been feeding. So they acted. They removed hearts, cut off heads, drove stakes through chests, shoved garlic in mouths, and occasionally they poured boiling wine over the body for good measure. Because clearly vampires hate hot drinks. In some cases, they ground up the heart into ashes and made the family drink it. Because if grandma's dying, the logical solution is to make her sip vampire dust. Medical science was still on vacation. One of the most famous cases happened in 1725 in Serbia. A man named Petar Blagojevich died, and soon after, 9 others followed. Locals said Petar had returned from the dead and attacked them. When they opened his grave, they claimed he looked too fresh and had blood on his lips. So they staked him and burned the body. The story spread across Europe, causing full-on vampire hysteria. Even the church stepped in, not because of the grave digging, but because vampires didn't fit the religious narrative. The church believed the dead should stay dead or wait peacefully for resurrection. Rising from the grave to bite your cousin didn't fit the theology. Eventually, science caught up. Doctors realized that tuberculosis, decomposition, and poor hygiene were to blame, not the undead. But by then, the vampire myth had taken hold. In 1897, Bram Stoker published Dracula and changed everything. Now, vampires had class. They wore capes, lived in castles, and made being undead look kind of cool. Fast forward to today. Vampires star in movies, TV shows, novels, video games, and Halloween costumes. They sparkle, smolder, and occasionally sell car insurance. But the truth behind their origin, it's a panic that came from fear, misunderstanding, and a complete lack of germ theory. So are vampires real? No. But the panic was. The superstition was. People truly believe this stuff. And that belief shaped part of our history. If you enjoyed this, hit like. Subscribe to see future videos. And share to support the channel. Because knowing things is power.
In the final days of World War II, as the world burned and then began to rebuild, one man remained hidden in the shadows of the Philippine jungle, a soldier who refused to surrender because in his heart the war was not over. His name was Hiroo Onoda. A lieutenant in the Imperial Japanese Army, trained in intelligence and survival, he was ordered to hold his ground on Lubang Island, no matter how long it took. Retreat was not an option. Surrender was forbidden. Death was preferable to dishonor. When the war officially ended in 1945, millions celebrated peace. But Onoda never got the message. Leaflets were dropped. Loudspeakers called out. Newspapers were left behind. He thought it was all enemy propaganda. In his mind, the fight still raged on. For years, he evaded capture. Living in the dense jungle. Surviving on bananas, coconuts, and stolen rice. Making traps. Hiding in the mountains. Engaging in gunfire with locals. He became a ghost story, part myth, part menace, part miracle. Decades passed. The world changed. Japan rose from the ashes. The Cold War ignited. Man walked on the moon. And still, Hiroo Onoda remained in the jungle, believing he was still a soldier of war. It wasn't until 1974, nearly 30 years after Japan surrendered, that a young Japanese traveler named Norio Suzuki set out to find him, not to arrest him, not to capture him, but to listen to him. to honor his story, to bring him home. But even then, Onoda refused to surrender. Not without orders from his commanding officer. That officer had long since returned to civilian life. But the Japanese government tracked him down, now an elderly bookseller, and flew him to Lubang Island. Standing face to face with his former superior, Hiroo Onoda finally accepted the truth. The war had ended. He removed his uniform, polished his sword, and after 29 years in hiding, saluted the rising sun one final time. He returned to Japan as a national hero, celebrated by some, questioned by others, revered by all who heard his unbelievable story. Onoda's tale is not just about war. It's about duty, belief, honor, and the power of a human being to endure beyond reason. In a world that often forgets the past, Hiroo Onoda reminds us what it means to truly never give up, even when the whole world moves on without you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if it moved you, because the world needs to remember legends like Hiroo Onoda.
The Wild West wasn't built with rules. It was carved out of chaos, grit, and the promise of something better, even if it killed you. It began with a gun in one hand and a dream in the other. Millions moved west, chasing gold, land, or freedom. What they found was a land untamed, where the law came second to survival, and every sunrise might be your last. Outlaws roamed like wolves, armed, hunted, and unafraid. Jesse James wasn't born evil. He was made by war. As a teenager, he fought in brutal guerrilla units during the Civil War. Afterward, he led a gang that robbed banks, trains, and anything else that moved. But Jesse didn't run. He wrote letters to newspapers justifying every heist. The people didn't see a criminal. They saw a modern Robin Hood. He was betrayed by his own gang, shot in the back of the head while adjusting a picture on the wall, by a man who wanted the reward money more than his loyalty. Billy the Kid was lightning in a human body. He danced between jail cells and gunfights, charming some and terrifying others. He spoke fluent Spanish, sang to children, and smiled before drawing on grown men. He once broke out of a two-story courthouse by killing both his guards and riding off on a stolen horse. His luck ran out in the dark. Sheriff Pat Garrett waited in the shadows and put a bullet through him before he even knew what hit him. He was 21, one kill for every year he lived. But legends weren't just born with bullets. Bass Reeves was a name history nearly buried. Born into slavery, he escaped, lived among native tribes, and taught himself to track like a ghost. He became the first black U.S. Marshal west of the Mississippi. He couldn't read, but he memorized over 3,000 warrants, and he brought them in alive or dead. They say he once arrested his own son for murder. Because out here, justice didn't care about blood. The women of the West were harder than the land they walked. Calamity Jane rode through fire and madness, drank with generals, and fought off Indian attacks with a rifle in one hand and a cigarette in the other. She never married Wild Bill Hickok, but she never stopped loving him. She asked to be buried beside him. She was. Stagecoach Mary broke noses and rules. She delivered mail through blizzards and bandit country. She drank whiskey, chewed cigars, and carried a shotgun under her skirts. When one man called her slow, she knocked out his teeth. The town cheered. Even Belle Starr, the bandit queen, rode with Jesse James and ruled a gang of her own. She wore velvet gowns to court and pistols to dinner. She was murdered on a dirt road, and to this day no one knows who pulled the trigger. And then there was love. The Wild West was brutal, but love still bloomed in saloons, train cars, and tents on the edge of nowhere. Gunfighters wrote poetry. Cowboys whispered dreams under starlit skies. One outlaw, Harry Alonzo Longabore, better known as the Sundance Kid, fell so deeply in love with a schoolteacher, he took her across the world to escape the law. They fled to South America. They died in a shootout in Bolivia. Together. Love didn't soften the West. It made the pain worth surviving. Towns like Deadwood, Tombstone, and Dodge City weren't just backdrops. They were pressure cookers. Lawmen like Wyatt Earp, Bat Masterson, and Wild Bill Hickok walked the tightrope between order and anarchy. The OK Corral shootout lasted just 30 seconds, but it turned into legend. 3 men killed, dozens of lives changed. That's the West. Blink, and your whole world changes. The California gold rush brought 300,000 people stampeding westward in search of fortune. Most left with nothing. Some died with gold in their pockets and a knife in their back. And yet, people kept coming. The Transcontinental Railroad stitched the continent together like a wound being sewn shut. But it was built on the backs of immigrants, Chinese workers, Irish laborers, freed slaves. Whole mountains were blasted apart. Towns appeared overnight. Where the train went, civilization followed. And with it, the end of the true Wild West. By 1890, the US Census declared the frontier closed. But the truth is, it never died. The West didn't vanish. It evolved. The grit, the rebellion, the romance, it still runs in American blood. In every underdog, every fighter, every wild heart that refuses to be tamed. The Wild West isn't gone. It's just waiting for the right kind of soul to ride again. If this stirred something in you, like the spirit of the frontier calling across time, smash that like button. Subscribe for more true legends, forgotten heroes, and raw, untamed history that Hollywood could never tell you. They don't teach this in school. They won't mention her in pirate movies. But the greatest pirate to ever live wasn't a man. Her name was Qing Shi. And she ruled the South China Sea with more power than most kings. Born in 1775 in Canton, she started life in a brothel. By the age of 32, she controlled the most feared pirate fleet in history. Her rise began when she married Zheng Yi, a feared pirate captain commanding the Red Flag Fleet. They ruled together for 6 years, conquering rival clans and expanding their influence. But when he died during a storm in 1807, chaos threatened to consume the empire they built. That's when Qing Shi took command. She didn't inherit the fleet, she secured it. By forging alliances, bribing key lieutenants, and marrying Zheng Yi's adopted son, she ensured full control. This wasn't luck. It was power politics, pirate style. She restructured the entire pirate confederation. 6 fleets, red, black, white, blue, yellow, and green, all answered to her. Each had its own admiral, but she commanded them all. She introduced one of the most brutal and effective pirate codes ever written. It enforced order where chaos once ruled. Under her, piracy became an organized business, efficient, ruthless, and terrifying. Her fleet grew to over 800 warships and 80,000 pirates. They attacked imperial convoys, seized merchant vessels, and collected protection money from entire coastal villages. She demanded tribute from major ports. If they refused, she destroyed their ships, burned their docks, and left no survivors. She defeated the Chinese Navy in open water, not once but several times. One legendary clash at the Pearl River Delta saw her fleet smash through a blockade of imperial warships, stealing their cannons and setting fire to their sails. The Qing government begged help from Portugal and Britain. Gunboats arrived. They failed. Qing Shi's tactics were unmatched. She used shallow draft ships to escape into coves where larger vessels couldn't follow. She faked retreats, then ambushed pursuing enemies. And she was a master of timing, striking during storms when defenders were weak. Her pirates once raided a salt monopoly warehouse, seizing the entire seasonal supply, then reselling it back to the government at a profit. She didn't just rob. She controlled markets. No one was safe. Fishermen, merchants, nobles, even tax collectors were forced to pay her tribute. She also expanded inland, controlling smuggling routes and punishing towns that resisted. Entire villages relocated to avoid her wrath. But her most surprising move wasn't violence. It was diplomacy. By 1810, the Qing dynasty was desperate. They offered her a full pardon, but she negotiated better. She walked into the Governor-General's palace with her top lieutenants, unarmed. She demanded amnesty for her fleet, retention of their wealth, and official military jobs for her officers. She got it all. No execution. No prison. No betrayal. Just total victory. She retired with her fortune, opened a gambling house, and became a respected businesswoman. She raised a family. She lived until the age of 69, something nearly unheard of for pirates. She died peacefully. And history buried her under silence. But the facts remain. She commanded the largest pirate fleet ever recorded. She beat empires, outmaneuvered navies, and walked away untouched. Her name was Qing Shi. If you learned something new, hit like. Subscribe for more untold history. And share this to help bring her story to the world.
Before man, before cities, before even the first bird's song, Earth belonged to giants, a world lush with towering ferns, volcanic mountains, and endless swamps teeming with life that time forgot. The skies roared with the wings of pterosaurs, vast and alien, gliding through air thicker and richer than ours today. Beneath them, dense jungles pulsed with ancient sounds, chirps, hisses, bellows, from creatures no human would ever see. Among the trees walked the mighty triceratops, armor-plated and regal, grazing like armored cattle on primeval shrubs. Across the plains, herds of Apatosaurus stretched like living towers, their necks rising above the canopy to feast on treetops no other creature could reach. But not all was peace in this lost world. Lurking in the shadows, velociraptors stalked their prey with chilling precision. Fast, cunning, coordinated. Every leaf rustle could mean death. Every breeze carried the scent of something ancient and hungry. And above them all, the undisputed king, Tyrannosaurus Rex, thundered through the land with jaws strong enough to crush bone and a gaze that froze everything in its path. Yet even he was not alone in the hunt. The oceans hid terrors of their own. Mosasaurus, the marine giant, waiting in prehistoric seas that shimmered with alien blues and bioluminescence. From desert cliffs to mist-choked valleys, Earth was a mosaic of untamed beauty and brutal survival. Giant insects buzzed through the air, wings like stained glass windows flashing under prehistoric sun. Enormous crocodilian ancestors lurked in the shallows, their eyes just above the waterline, motionless, until they weren't. The land itself was alive. Volcanoes rumbled like sleeping beasts, reshaping the world with every eruption. Ash blanketed entire forests, preserving the bones of those who once ruled. Every footprint left behind was a story, one of survival, of instinct, of evolution in its rawest form. This wasn't just a time of monsters, it was nature's boldest experiment, each creature perfectly engineered for its moment in time, battling extinction with every breath. Tiny Compsognathus darted between roots, scavengers with sharp eyes and sharper teeth, while high above, Quetzalcoatlus, with a wingspan wider than a fighter jet, soared between prehistoric thermals. Forests glowed with flora long extinct, cycads, ginkgos, horsetails taller than men. The air was thick with moisture, pollen, and the constant noise of life in motion. Massive Stegosaurus lumbered across hot plateaus, their spiked tails ready for war. Even the night brought fear, the calls of nocturnal predators echoing through the dark. Some dinosaurs were armored like tanks, like the Ankylosaurus, dragging its clubbed tail like a mace. Others were built for speed, like the Gallimimus, racing through fields at over 40 miles an hour. Climate shaped evolution. Droughts came. Floods followed. Entire species vanished as others adapted or died. Through it all, Earth spun on, writing its history in claw marks and fossil beds. Then came the Skyfire, a rock from space, a moment of extinction. Darkness swept the globe. Plants died. Temperatures plunged. The reign of dinosaurs was over, but their legacy would live on. In the bones beneath our feet, in the birds above our heads, and in the stories we tell of a world before time, a world of wonder, of terror, of breathtaking beauty, where giants ruled and Earth itself was alive. But even as extinction loomed, Earth was still full of wonders few could imagine. In lush coastal lagoons, herds of hadrosaurs gathered, their strange calls echoing like music across the marsh. These weren't mindless beasts. They traveled in groups, protected their young, and may have even mourned their dead. Each footprint left in mud told of intelligence and emotion. In the north, icy winds howled over polar forests, where feathered dinosaurs adapted to cold and long nights. They were survivors, proof that evolution had plans beyond teeth and scale. Back in the tropics, the rainforest teemed with creatures of every shape and color. Some used camouflage, some used display, some used brute force, and some used speed. Not all dinosaurs were titans. Some were no larger than chickens, yet every bit as fierce. Evolution was relentless. It tested every shape, every strategy. Spines, plates, crests, feathers, horns, each a response to Earth's changing moods. And as the continents drifted, isolated populations gave rise to entirely new species. Dinosaurs of the southern hemisphere evolved apart. Strange, alien, beautiful. There were the massive Argentinosaurus, so large their steps shook the ground like thunder. And the terrifying Giganotosaurus, rival to the T-Rex, prowling the ancient South American plains. The seas too continued to shift, vast inland oceans created by rising global temperatures. There, sea monsters ruled unchecked. No gills, no mercy. Above, the sky was alive with color. Bird-like raptors glided between branches, their feathers dazzling in hues we can only guess. And below, the earth whispered its secrets, bones turning to stone, forests buried beneath volcanic ash, time encasing life like a museum in the dirt. The asteroid wasn't the end of dinosaurs. It was the end of their world, but the beginning of ours. Some evolved, some survived in the smallest corners, and some still soar above us every single day, yet their shadows linger. Every museum skeleton, every fossil pulled from ancient stone, is a monument to a time when Earth didn't belong to us. We think of ourselves as kings of the planet, but for millions of years, that crown belonged to something else. Creatures that ruled with claw and fang, creatures that shaped the land, creatures that remind us how fragile greatness can be. Their world is gone, but it left its mark. On our myths, on our bones, on our dreams, a glimpse into a forgotten age, where Earth was wild, untamed, and truly alive. But this story doesn't end here. If this world stirred something in you, if the roar of the T-Rex or the shadow of the Quetzalcoatlus gave you chills, then hit that like button and let us know this journey was worth it. Subscribe now to uncover the rest of Earth's hidden past. from deep ocean leviathans to ancient warriors, empires and mysteries waiting in stone. So the next time you look up at a bird in the sky, remember, its ancestors once walked beside monsters. What we've shown you today isn't just science, it's a resurrection. Because this channel is where the dead roar back to life.
And you're just in time for the next chapter.
They called them savages. Beasts from the ice-choked north. But what sailed from Scandinavia wasn't chaos, it was precision. Row upon row of hardened warriors, faces carved by cold winds, eyes set on glory. When the longships breached foreign shores, history bent beneath their oars. From the fjords of Norway to the burning monasteries of Lindisfarne, the Viking Age was baptized in fire. But they were not just raiders, they were poets, builders, lovers, and kings. Each raid told a story. Each conquest fed a legacy that no blade could erase. It began in the late 8th century. A single strike on English soil marked a turning point. Lindisfarne, 793. The Northumbrian monks never saw it coming. The sea had always protected them until now. The Vikings arrived like a storm with axes instead of thunder. Gold, relics, manuscripts, and blood soaked the ground. Europe awoke, trembling. But they did not stop with England. From the shores of Francia, where they would one day lay siege to Paris, to the Emerald Hills of Ireland, the Norse carved their mark. They founded Dublin with blood-stained hands and iron ambition, ruling the city as both tyrants and traitors. They came not just to take, but to stay. In the east, Swedish Vikings, Varangians, traveled the rivers of Russia. Some became kings. Others pledged themselves to Byzantium, earning renown as the feared Varangian Guard. Cloaked in steel and silence, they guarded emperors, far from the snows of their homeland. Back in the west, one name echoed louder than all, Ragnar Lothbrok. Whether man or myth, his legend moved armies. It is said he sailed across the North Sea, led daring raids across Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, and laughed at death itself when captured by King Aella of Northumbria. They say snakes devoured him in a pit, but even that could not kill the legend. His sons would avenge him with fury unmatched. Hit that like button if you are enjoying the video, really helps to support the channel. The great heathen army descended upon England in 865, united not just by blood, but by wrath. Ivar the Boneless, a commander as ruthless as he was brilliant, carved through kingdoms, forging fear into loyalty. No one knew how he stood, yet all trembled when he moved. But with power came division. The sons of Ragnar fractured. Ivar would not live forever. And as Viking kingdoms rose, York in England, the Danelaw across Mercia, so too did betrayals. Brothers turned against brothers. Kings were crowned and dethroned with blades still warm. In Iceland, settlers carved farms from volcanic stone, chasing peace away from war. Yet even there, blood feuds burned hotter than lava. One man's honor could ignite years of vengeance. The sagas tell of love lost, oaths broken, and warriors choosing death over shame. To the south, the Vikings dared the Mediterranean. In 859, they raided the coasts of Spain, North Africa, and even reached Italy. But the sea was no ally here. Disease, heat, and unfamiliar shores weakened them. Still, they fought, for even in retreat, a Viking must die with pride. They ruled Normandy not with axes but alliances. The Frankish king granted land to Rollo, a Viking warlord, in exchange for peace. Rollo bent the knee, but never the will. His descendants would one day change Europe forever. One of them would be called William the Conqueror. But the Viking world, like all things, began to fade. Christianity seeped into their bones. Kings traded Odin's fury for the cross. The old gods were buried, not slain. Still, some resisted. Some clung to the ancient ways, fighting both crusaders and time itself. In 1066, one last roar shook the north. Harold Hardrada, a warrior king and former Varangian, sailed to claim the English crown. He died at Stamford Bridge, struck down before the Battle of Hastings would seal England's fate. With his fall, the Viking Age ended, not in surrender, but in a final, glorious stand. Yet their spirit never died. Their ships still haunt history's shores. Their names echo in our bloodlines. Their tales wrapped in ice and fire are told again and again. Not as villains. Not as myths. But as men who dared to shape the world with nothing but iron and will. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button. If you'd like to see more, subscribe to see our future videos. Share if you'd like to support the channel.
The sun rises over Rome. Not gently, not kindly. It blazes like a god's eye over blood-soaked sands and towering stone. In the shadow of palaces and temples, the city's heartbeat isn't found in poetry or politics. It's in the sound of chains clinking in the dark, as another gladiator wakes to survive another day. He's not born of nobility. He has no last name. He is one of thousands, slaves, criminals, and prisoners of war, forced into the arena for Rome's cruel entertainment. In the eyes of the empire, he is nothing more than flesh meant to fall. The day begins with brutality. Before food. Before rest. The Lannister barks orders as wooden swords crash into ribs, into jaws, into guts. Training isn't just pain. It's a science. Gladiators are drilled in dozens of combat styles. The secutor, built like a tank behind a rounded helmet and shield. The retiarius, fast and vicious, armed with a net and trident. Each role demands perfection. One misstep in the arena, and you're dead before the crowd can even gasp. Sweat soaks the sand. Men fall from exhaustion, not weakness. Because weakness doesn't survive in the ludus. Food is rationed for muscle. Oatmeal, barley, beans. A gladiator's diet is heavy, meant to build a layer of fat that slows bleeding when the blade strikes. Every inch of them is built for violence. But even in this hell, he finds her. A Thracian warrior. Not just a novelty to parade around. She's trained, deadly, scarred, and defiant. Gladiatrix.
The American Civil War.
She fights like a storm in
A
flesh.
brutal conflict that shaped the soul of a nation. This is
They met in the pit, neither yielding, both bleeding, until the doctor called it off. Since then, it's been something unspoken. Respect.